And now it's my pleasure to introduce Olivier Brandicourt, who is 1 year into his role as CEO of Sanofi. Welcome, Monsieur Brandicourt. Great pleasure to have you here. For our purposes here at this meeting, he is a sort of Renaissance man, I would describe him as, in that he started out as a physician by training. He has 30 years of worldwide experience in the pharmaceutical industry, but he also has very strong connections with Africa. As chief, he worked there as, in the Congo as a doctor. He started his career as medical director for Africa at Warner Lambert Park Davis. Doesn't it take some of us back to have names like that still around, all sort of subsumed? And he was in the interim, of course, chief executive officer of Bayer Healthcare. He was senior roles at Pfizer. And he's also, of course, a specialist in infectious diseases, where he worked at the Pitié-Salpêtrière, I'm so sorry, Pitié-Salpêtrière, Pitié pour mon français, Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris. That's enough from me. You're well aware of what's been going on at this BIOVISION conference. Sanofi is closely involved in it. There's all these wide range of issues that have been discussed, which cut across many of the areas you deal with. You, after working on the ground, even in the Congo as a doctor there, you chose to make your career in the pharmaceutical industry as a way of trying to meet the needs that we've been discussing the last couple of days here as a perceived. Why did you make that choice?
Thank you, Peter. I did make that choice because I felt, having come back to the Congo, where somewhere and somewhat I felt I could be, the Dr. Schweitzer #2. I realized that the impact actually I could have was going to be much, much larger if I was joining the industry. And I joined it for a very specific purpose at the time, which was to develop an antimalarial product which was going to be potentially active and effective against chloroquine-resistant strains of malaria. And I felt that was a very interesting goal and could that way, again, have an impact on a very large number of patients. So that's the reason why I joined the industry. But of course, after that, I moved from science and medicine to a more commercial and general management position, as you mentioned.
How's that working out for you? The career's not going too badly so far, is it?
You can say it that way. I thought it was too long, but anyway, to get here. No, it went very well. I thought I did it in a way that was progressive. I moved from medical and science to what we call product planning in our industry, where you start learning the commercial side, but at a certain pace. And I felt I was actually pretty good at doing that and serving that link between the two worlds. Before, one day my boss said, you better, learn the real thing, and started to give me operational positions. And that's how I ended up in Canada first, managing Warner Lambert Park Davis there in the early 90s.
As you've risen through the ranks, if one may use that term, obviously you're increasingly in a position to exploit opportunities that you see that can somehow meet some of the objectives that you had when you started out as a physician. Do you also come across an increasing number of barriers to being able to grasp those opportunities?
You mean the opportunities of innovation, right?
Well, innovation is obviously one of the main areas here. Yeah, but you face a million challenges, I'm sure.
The way to be honest, and we talked about that here quite a while.
You can be completely honest here. There's only us. It's not being reported anywhere at all. There's only 30 journalists in the room.
I think we are an incredible time in history, and it was said several times before, but medical and scientific history. When the genome was mapped back, many years ago, the industry felt that we were going to reap really the outcome and the benefit of that very quickly afterwards. And that, of course, didn't happen. And we went through, a very long period of 10 years and more of not having much innovation brought to the market. Today is very different. Why? Because we do have now the benefit of the sequencing of the human genome. We have the biotechnology going along with it. And that's the reason why it was mentioned, including by Mrs. Grosstedt. We are facing this incredible wave of innovation at a time where we need it. We need it because, the 65 and older are going to grow at 75%, in the next, between now and, 50 years from now. So a very, very large number of seniors are going to, be part of this society. And the second piece is the cost. 700 billion euro, I think, today involved or supporting the management of chronic diseases. So all of that need changes. And I really agree with what, again, Madame Grosstedt said about managing the future and finding solution, an innovative solution to deal with that problem. And I think there is two things. Going with that innovation, the piece which is very, very important to me is everything around digital. And how do we use digital to reduce the cost of many aspects of what healthcare is and what this industry does, from innovation, clinical trials, and the whole development cycle, which, and it has been said, is today still so expensive.
A brief digression, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but how fast is Sanofi as a company able to evolve to take fully on board the digital revolution?
So the way we are doing it is starting with chronic diseases, and I mentioned the cost along with it, and in our case, we have a real franchise and understanding of diabetes. So the first thing we did was to understand what big data analytical capabilities could do for us, and that's how we partner with Verily, the life science arm of Google. And that works very well. We're putting a joint venture together, and if it works, that's the vision, we'll almost be able to create an artificial pancreas. And the reason being that we would have, and I give you a little bit of the setup, but micro patches, right, but very micro. We were last week or 2 weeks ago in California looking at those for the first time. Not invasive at all on your skin, and somewhere on your skin too, and you would have a micro pump on which Sanofi would have put very concentrated insulin, and the patches, when both level would correlate, because of course you don't want to inject too much insulin in a patient, but if the level correlates and indicates that you are in hyperglycemia situations, then wireless, you would trigger the micro pump. So at the end of the day, what you have is a constant, and probably much better than your own pancreas, to be honest. You have a constant control of your glycemia. And the beauty of that is you're going to control the outcome. So no more impact on eyes anymore, no more impact on limbs and feet. And so potentially allowing companies like us going to the payers in North America or in Europe and saying, look, we are delivering outcomes. How do you want to deal with the contract?
I wonder if that's the second part, because I interrupted you to ask for an example of digital, and you said digital was one part of the solution. What was the second part you were going on to say? Was it, in fact, making sure that the reimbursement systems really recognize what you...
But before I go there, then, you talked about data and digital, and I think there is one piece which we are facing, which we need to embrace in a very, very big way, is big data and how much it is going to help us to have the future of medicine being, predictive, personalized, and so forth. Another example related to that future of medicine, because it's really, really important, I think, to understand that. And it was, I suspect, a very big theme of this conference. You can start, there is a study which, again, and I'm referring to Google in that case, but it could be done in many different ways by different companies, but called Baseline. So you start with healthy subjects. Because of biotechnologies, you know absolutely everything about those healthy subjects. And you take a very large population covering, you know, society. So you start very young and you end very old. And you segment those by a certain number, let's say 10,000, 1,000 each between 0 and 100. And you follow them for 10 years. But during those 10 years, on an ongoing basis, you are capturing that biologic information, as well as capturing a lot of information because those people would be connected, right? Connected during 10 years might be a little bit of an issue for some, but the level of information you would get would be tremendous in identifying what are the culprit protein or mechanism which trigger a disease, including environmental. And that kind of data, if you have the capability of analyzing the data, will definitely help you to be predictive and preventive.
Okay.
And I think that's, frankly, I think that's the future of medicine.
We look forward to that. Now, can we just jump back to what I rather crudely introduced into the subject there, which was the vulgar subject of money? Well, you alluded to yourself and going to pay us.
I knew I had to go through that one.
We have to take account of this, because one of the themes throughout all the discussions here was that at the end of the day, somebody has to pay. If you've been out at all in the lobbies, any of you, you will have, as I have, come across many of them charming young people with inventions or ideas or new ideas, and they've been going around meeting up with potential investors and so on, trying to get their ideas funded. Because without the funding, nothing will happen, whether you're a small startup with an app or whether you're an internet multinational like Sanofi. So how do you see that balance, the understanding of that need, particularly in Europe at the moment? France, we're conscious of a lot of pressures. Marisol said a little bit about it yesterday, and we all see what's happening in Germany or the UK or Spain or Italy at the moment. How do you find that as a climate looking forward? Does it make you worried that you're not going to be able to get payers to understand what it is you're able to provide?
Well, I must say conferences like this probably help quite a bit to understand each other and where are we going and potentially where are the solutions. Are we concerned by the level of debate around pricing in general? I mean, I would say Europe and the States, and it probably started in the States earlier in 2015. Remember one tweet from Hillary Clinton, who started her campaign at that time. It raised about $40 or $50 billion in market cap in a matter of 2 hours. So just to tell you how hot is the debate on prices. And of course, we are very much focused on participating into that debate. What we're saying, what the industry says, and it's true in the US and in Europe, is it has to be, and I think Mrs. Grosstedt said it too, and it was one of the four pillars, it has to be about value. It has to be about value. The pricing of pharmaceuticals have to reflect the value it brings to society. Now, easy to say, difficult but potentially to do. And how do you assess, frankly, the value? Our position is it starts in the lab, at the discovery level, and it ends, you know, when the drug is on the market, using real-world data to understand how it's used and how much it triggers expenses. And when you have that understanding, then you're talking about real value. And, you know, it has to be compared with the situation without that innovation. And the price has to reflect the difference in overall value at the end.
Are you winning that argument?
Are we winning that argument? I can't be that optimistic yet. But I think the notion of value, when I'm, again, hearing a representative in Brussels, talking about it is, in my view, pretty encouraging. Until now, we defended our pricing through the cost of development and research. And frankly, it's a good start. Mm-hmm. But I think it has to be two different things. That plus the value it brings to the market. And a combination of both. But just on the development cost, I think it's very important to realize that it's easy for a lot of us in this room to get to the real cost of developing, first of all, discovering and developing medicines. You take the annual report of the top, let's say, 15, 20 companies, right? You go to public companies. You go to the R&D line. You add all of that, and you look at what's put on the market 5 years later. And you divide that, right, by the overall amount, or the opposite, and you get today to probably an average of $2.3 billion. Mm-hmm. So I understand that Mrs. Griffith from J&J was talking about drugs on which we were not getting rewarded. Mm-hmm. Of course, when you have put on the table $2.3 billion, it takes a long time, and a very successful product and a clearly differentiated product to create that value, which will be the return. And the return has to be on top of what, a weighted average of the cost of capital is. That's how we work, and that's how we should be rewarded. And it's 7-8%, so it has to be on top of that.
Well, let's see how far this conference has helped to widen understanding of that point of view. Monsieur Brandicourt, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for your time here. We are coming to the end of our time, and perhaps since we're not having formal closing speeches, there is a presentation ceremony immediately after this, but I think perhaps I can ask you, Monsieur Brandicourt, to pronounce the word that this edition of BioVision is now closed.
I'm not sure I'm the best position to do that, but
I'm feeding you a very good line there, so I'm
comply. Sure. No, I think it's the right debate, again, at the right time. The future is, I'm an optimistic, and I see the future of, medicine as, gaining a lot of the period we're going through. So, again, the BioVision themes, the one I've seen on screens, are exactly the appropriate one and the appropriate discussion. And through conferences like this, we will make a lot of progress. So that's what I would say. And thank you very much, everyone.